Hardy, Editorial Director of Broadband Technology Report. And welcome to today's Hangout on DOCSIS 3.1 specifically. Our event is titled DOCSIS 3.1, A Look Ahead. Our event today is being sponsored by ARIS and VX, and we thank them for their help in making this Hangout possible. So as the title of this webcast implies, what we're hoping to do is look forward to 2016 when we anticipate that the first DOCSIS 3.1 deployments will occur. To talk a little bit about whether the stage is indeed set for those deployments and what those deployments might look at or look like, we have a pair of experts with us today. One is Chris Bastian, who is the newly minted Senior Vice President and CTO of SCTE. Chris is a 30-year industry veteran and, as I said, is brand new to SCTE. Over the past 3 decades, he's been at the forefront of Wi-Fi, advanced broadband, and telecommunications security developments with Comcast, RCN, and the National Security Agency. He joins SCTE following more than 10 years at Comcast, where he most recently has been the executive director focusing on Comcast's Xfinity Wi-Fi network. Also, we'll have George Salinger, Vice President of Access Architecture at Comcast. George, as is well known, has played a key role in the development and adoption of the Converged Cable Access Platform, which incorporates both video and data infrastructure in one platform, and at least with some operators, may be the first vehicle for DOCSIS 3.1 deployments. Recently, he's headed the MSO's experiments with DOCSIS 3.1, and with live field trials coming up, including some smaller experiments with Comcast employees and other friendlies, as it was called in his deployment. Chris and George, thank you for joining us today. So let's start maybe with you, Chris, since you have a brand new title and maybe not even business cards yet. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what it is you're hoping to do at SCTE in your new role, and in particular how you see this potentially applying to DOCSIS 3.1.
Good afternoon, Steve, and thank you very much for inviting me. Yeah, like you said, it's day 2 for me over here at the SCTE. I was at Comcast for almost 15 years, so it feels a little strange. I did catch myself answering the phone a couple times this morning as identifying myself as Comcast, but I'm very excited to be over here at SCTE. And our fundamental mission is to standardize the interfaces in the industry, so that there's no question, what the interfaces are, that they can be rolled out globally. Number 2 is training the workforce, so that as we roll out new technologies like DOCSIS 3.1, that the entire workforce, whether it's field operations or care, that they know how to make the new technologies operationally efficient. And number 3 is to craft those operational best practices that we take the best in breed, all the feedback from all of the members at SCTE, all of the different MSOs, and come up with the best practices for maintaining those network technologies. So very happy to be over at SCTE and dig into this new work. And I know you'll be mentioning this a little later, but we're very happy with the stage that we're at with DOCSIS 3.1, and I'll just leave it at that for right now as you go into the further questions.
Sounds good, great. So speaking of questions on DOCSIS 3.1, George, maybe we'll start with you. You've been quoted as saying that you're anticipating having field trials begin by the end of this year. You've got 2.5 weeks left. Are you going to meet that deadline?
Hey, Stephen, thanks for having me as well. Yes, we're very confident that by the end of the year we'll have DOCSIS 3.1 ready and in trials in the field. We have had it in the labs for a long time now. We actually started testing DOCSIS 3.1, believe it or not, in December of last year, a little more than a year ago, and since then we've been testing it with incremental functionality for many months now. Many new features, incremental additions of functionality, and we have it at the point that it's ready to go into the field, and we feel very confident that by the end of the year we'll have it in the field with friendly subscribers.
Very good. So along those lines, can you tell us a little bit more about what you're expecting from the test? So for example, how long will they last, and can you provide any details about how many potential subscribers might be involved?
Yeah, so the plan is to begin by installing it in a few head ends. We plan to install it in each one of the divisions. So it will be initially in one head end, each one of the divisions. And progress as time goes by, progressively we'll have more service groups. We'll start with a few service groups. In fact, we'll start with a single service group, and we'll have more service groups. Then we'll start installing it in employees' homes, even though the service groups are going to involve all subscribers, right? A service group that is connected to a CMTS that supports DOCSIS 3.1 is also connected to all of the subscribers that are in that home, that are in that service group. So progressively we'll install it in more employees' homes that are in those service groups, and as time goes by we'll just continue expanding until we start rolling it out to customers. So it'll be a slow, progressive, orderly deployment, starting with employees, moving on to customers, starting with functionality that we have now and adding more functionality over the next few months, starting with basic operations, and then eventually migrating to full deployment ready.
So in terms of the technology that you'll be testing in these field trials, are you anticipating putting the technologies of a variety of system providers through their paces as part of an overall evaluation process, or have you kind of narrowed your suppliers down already?
No, we're starting with a pair, if you will, head-end equipment and cable modem equipment. But we're eventually going to expand to all the equipment that we have deployed. So all of the head ends that we have eventually will be upgraded to support DOCSIS 3.1, and we plan to do that pretty rapidly over time. The same thing with the CPE. We start with one CPE because it makes the process of development and operational readiness easier. But over time, we'll add more CPE as it becomes available.
So speaking of CPE, at the breakfast event that you were kind enough to participate in at SCTE Cable Tech Expo, you mentioned the fact that Comcast has developed its own cable modem for DOCSIS 3.1. Can you talk a little bit about why you decided to pursue that strategy and what some of the salient features of the cable modem will be?
Sure. So this is yes, we did decide to develop a cable modem. We did that with an equipment manufacturer. And here's the the nutshell strategy, right? We needed to have, we wanted to have network readiness as quickly as possible, and in order to do that, both we, for our own activities, as well as the equipment developers that are developing software and hardware for the CMTS equipment, needed to have a cable modem for conducting testing. We didn't want to wait, if you will, for the development of all of the gateway functions that over time are going to get incorporated into the CPE, such as Wi-Fi and other functionality, right, voice ports, etc. So instead of waiting for a full-fledged gateway to be developed, we develop a simple cable modem, plain Jane cable modem, as one would say, which we did with a with a cable modem manufacturer, so that we can have it. We and our head-end equipment partners could have it available. And so we had the first cable modem very early this year in late January, and we have many hundreds of these cable modems, which we distributed to our equipment partners. We distributed them in the field. We had used them extensively in the labs, and this is the same cable modem with which we're doing network readiness testing as the months go by. Eventually, we're not going to deploy the service with this cable modem. Instead, we're going to deploy it with a gateway like we normally do. And this gateway is under development right now by our vendor partners. And when it's available, we'll start deploying with that gateway.
Very good. So, Chris, looking at a broader perspective, perhaps from the position of SCTE, what are you seeing as far as what other operators are doing to kind of prepare themselves for trials of DOCSIS 3.1?
So I'm saying that they're keeping a close eye, and they're like, it depends on the competition in the area and what the customers are demanding. The big thing with DOCSIS 3.1 is the greater throughput and the greater speeds, and any operator that has those pressing demands from either the customer side or the competitive side is going to be interested in deploying this new technology. So they're keeping a close eye on how the Comcast trials are doing, and I would prefer to let them speak directly on how their trial work and lab testing work is doing. But they're leading similar to the DOCSIS 3.0 deployments. They're keeping an eye on the early adopters, and we'll closely follow suit.
So, keeping in mind the proprietary nature of some of these other operators' positioning and plans, am I correct in inferring from what you've said that basically you're seeing other operators not only watching what Comcast is going to be up to, but formalizing and perhaps even well down the road towards creating their own field trials themselves?
So monitoring the work that the interop work that's happening at Cable Labs, and keeping an eye with on the vendor roadmaps on when the CMTS and the cable modem gear is going to be available. Yes.
Very good. So George,
Steve, if I may add something to it, we have active discussions with several cable operators, and actually more and more as time goes by. Not only because other cable operators want to know what we are doing, we want to know what they're doing as well. This is a very cooperative industry, fortunately for us all, and we exchange knowledge and information and and experiences very extensive. And so we know from these exchanges that there are many cable operators that are planning on deploying DOCSIS 3.1, and starting in 17 and starting in 16 like we are. So there's very, very broad interest on this, which is why when events like this one or the breakfast that you organized at SCTE or other chats come up, that so many people are interested on.
Very good. Thank you for the plug. So along those lines, as we discussed, the lead up to these field trials has included a fair amount of lab testing. So, George, in terms of those lab trials, what have you seen? Have you been? I would imagine you're at least somewhat satisfied with the results of the technology performance because you're moving to field trials. But were there any items that either surprised you or caused you any concern that came up during the lab trial phase?
No, like with any development, you end up finding, difficulties. I'll call them generally difficulties. Sometimes it's implementation complexity, unexpected implementation complexity. Sometimes it is results that you didn't expect, and we encounter all of those, right? But in general, we're finding that DOCSIS 3.1 works in the cable plant. We've been testing OFDM signals in the downstream, like I've published in multiple venues. We've been testing OFDM signals in the downstream, not using CMTS equipment, but using equipment that is readily available that can produce test signals. We've been actively testing in multiple different networks that we have in multiple different cities to make sure that OFDM signals and these very high order modulations that we'll be using will indeed work, and we know that they do work because we have been doing this testing. So we're very happy to be able to confirm that we can deploy DOCSIS 3.1 net systems in the networks that we have already deployed. Furthermore, we're seeing that the performance that we were hoping for is actually what we can get. We are able to run OFDM signals at 1,024 and 4,096 QAM in our existing networks. That is phenomenal compared to what we are able to do today. So we're extremely happy with the performance of DOCSIS 3.1 as a technology and our networks as a vehicle to carry them. Beyond that, there are more and more features that are going to be added over time. We started with a subset of features just so that we can get the development done quicker, so that we can get it operationalized quicker, and so that the testing that vendors must do can be more focused and can get done quicker. But over time, we'll be adding more and more functionality that will allow us to, for example, deploy DOCSIS 3.1 in the upstream, which we're not doing initially. That allow us to have multiple modulation profiles than we started initially, and on and on and on. There'll be more and more features added over the next couple of years.
Very good. So you were mentioning the fact that you were evaluating the technology, across multiple network types and whatnot to make sure that it worked across your various footprints. Did you find that there was any significant difference in performance depending upon where the network was or how the network was constructed?
Yeah. So yes. So we tested in 750 megahertz systems, 860 megahertz systems, and gigahertz systems. We found in general in the bandpass area that the performance is the same because the specifications for these networks are the same. But we did find differences in the roll-off area. First of all, we were surprised to see how well the OFDM signals work in the roll-off area. Single carrier QAM signals, like in DOCSIS 3.1 and QAM video, etc., they require that the entire band that you're allocating for a channel operate correctly all of the time. With OFDM, we don't have to have that that constant operation across the entire band, and therefore, in the roll-off area, OFDM works better and surprisingly better than single carrier QAMs. And so, one thing that we did notice difference is how much of the roll-off area, or how well the DOCSIS 3.1 signals work in the roll-off area in different systems. And as you might imagine, we find that in 860 systems, the roll-off, the use of the spectrum in the roll-off area yields better results and more capacity, higher modulation orders than in more spectrum than in 750 networks. But this is just the expected result of the topology of HFC networks. But in general, we're very happy to see how well do DOCSIS 3.1 signals work in all our systems in the bandpass area, and extremely surprised and happy how well they work in the roll-off area. And there are differences which are obviously the result of the different topologies of HFC networks.
Now, Chris, George mentioned the fact that the DOCSIS 3.1 technology seems to be working very well on existing networks, and of course, backwards compatibility with DOCSIS 3.0 was a major part of the DOCSIS 3.1 specification effort. Can you talk a little bit about the interplay between, or what you expect to see between the interplay between 3.1 and 3.0, and in particular, whether you have to fully commit to 3.1 before you start thinking about deploying some of this equipment?
So that's the nice thing about the spec development here is it is backwards compatible. That you do have to allocate spectrum to 3.1 technology and have a clean enough plant to support the 3.1 technology. But then once deployed, you can bond across the 3.1 and the 3.0 channels so that you do have that backward compatibility. And as George said, you can have in the same service group in the same household, you could have 3.1 and 3.0 modems gracefully coexist.
So, George, I imagine this is something you're looking at doing. Can you talk a little bit about how you plan on using DOCSIS 3.0 and 3.1 together, bonding channels and that sort of thing?
Sure. So a couple of things. One of them is, like Chris just said, in the DOCSIS 3.1 specification, the DOCSIS 3.1 modem will bond the existing capacity, 3.0 and 3.1 capacity. And so you don't have to reproduce, if you will, capacity in order to get a 3.1 modem to work. You can start by adding capacity with 3.1 OFDM signals, and the 3.1 modems will use that capacity as well as all of the capacity that you've already deployed with 3.0 and 2.0 modems. But we have done extensive testing in the lab to make sure that that is indeed the case. And here's why. As we start, the very first thing that we will have to do in deploying in any fashion, whether it's a trial or eventually through deployment, the very first thing we have to do is activate in the head-end equipment 3.1 functionality. When you do that, you're essentially upgrading a chassis, right, and activating in a service group 3.1 in that service group. When you do that, all the existing modems that are deployed, all the 2.0 and 3.0 modems that are deployed, have to continue operating in exactly the same way as they did before you did the upgrade. And so we've tested that extensively in the lab to make sure that that is indeed the case with all our deployed devices. That includes cable modems and gateways as well as set-top boxes. And so that's a degree of backward compatibility that must be established, right? The very first thing you do is you deploy 3.1 in the CMTS, and all your existing 2.0, 3.0 devices have to continue operating. Then the next thing you will do is deploy a 3.1 cable modem in that service group. And that cable modem has to interoperate with all the equipment that has been deployed. In other words, it does not have to affect or harm the operation of the other cable modems, and should bond and should use all of the capacity that's available. The other aspect of this is not only can you deploy a DOCSIS 3.1 CMTS software and hardware in a place where you don't have 3.1 cable modems, as you would do initially in any place where you would deploy, but you can also start deploying 3.1 cable modems and gateways in places where you do not yet have a 3.1 CMTS equipment. So, for example, you could start buying 3.1 cable modems, cable gateways that are capable of 3.1, and start deploying them in places where you have not yet upgraded to 3.1 in the head end. Then eventually, once you deploy 3.1 in the head end, once you upgrade the head end to support 3.1, then and configure capacity, network capacity to support 3.1 spectrum, then those 3.1 modems, which will initially work as if they were a 3.0 modem, they will begin working as a 3.1 modem, bonding the capacity is available with 3.1. So you get backwards compatibility both ways, right? In the head end with respect to the CPE, and the new CPE with respect to the OSN.
So another element that sometimes gets short shrift in terms of attention when doing planning for some of these major new technology rollouts is the supporting tools, the test equipment, and whatnot. George, what are you seeing so far along those lines? Are you going to have the tools you need to affect these rollouts when you're ready to do it?
Yes, the quick answer is yes, we already have it. So we knew this was going to be a long haul, right? So back in October of 2014, we started working with all of the installation and maintenance tool manufacturers or system developers, and over the course of this last year, we've been working with all of them, and we now have in our labs, and we've actually tested a little bit in the field to make sure that they work, with respect to backward compatibility also. We have now tools that will support DOCSIS 3.1 channels for installation. We're now starting to focus on maintenance, so we're going to expand the functionality of these installation tools to support maintenance as well. So we already have tools that support DOCSIS 3.1. They're starting to become commercially available, and we're starting to use them in the field. So we're very happy that, of course, we foresaw that, but that the development that needed to take place has already taken place, or has been happening at a very, very fast pace to match the development path that 3.1 is been on.
Very good. We've got about 5 minutes left before we'll be concluding this hangout. If you in the audience have questions you'd like me to ask of our experts, you can forward those to me via Twitter. Basically, tweet your question using the hashtag D3Hangout, and we'll get to as many of those as we can in the last few minutes of our event. Now, another aspect that's very important when you're rolling out new technology is training, and I know that it just so happens that Chris, you are at a DOCSIS 3.1 training boot camp. Can you talk a little bit about the boot camp concept and what kind of training you're hoping to provide?
Sure. This is a great day to be having this hangout. It's day one of a 3-day boot camp. It's being conducted here at a Comcast facility in Atlanta, and we have a handpicked audience. So it's one of the first renditions of the course. So we have Comcast personnel from across the United States here taking the class, the SCTE D3.1 boot camp. And we're soliciting their feedback, so it's extremely interactive. We're going over sections, and they're providing real-time feedback to make the class better. And we're going to be taking general enrollments in the class starting early in the new year. And again, the goal is to make the rollout, the deployment of DOCSIS 3.1 out into the networks as smoothly as possible for the engineering, capacity planning, and operational personnel.
So I imagine that you folks are interested in providing training not only to Comcast, but obviously to other cable operators out there. If they're interested in having a boot camp at their own facilities, how do they go about doing that?
They can contact me, or they can go straight to our SCTE.org website, or they can contact our training vice president Rennie Gorman, who's also here with me, as well as Mark Zuban here in Atlanta today.
Very good. Now, another aspect of DOCSIS 3.1 that is new is the proactive network maintenance, or PNM capabilities. George, can you talk a little bit about PNM and what it is Comcast hopes to benefit from, or how Comcast hopes to benefit from these capabilities?
Sure. So a couple things about PNM in general and PNM for 3.1. So PNM in general is something that we use extremely extensively. Every one of our installers, every one of our maintenance techs, in fact, every one of our customer service techs uses PNM tools at every engagement, right? At every customer engagement, every field engagement. It's amazing how much we've grown to use PNM and how useful it has become. With DOCSIS 3.1, PNM was designed into the DOCSIS 3.1 spec from the beginning. It was not a project that we undertook later on as DOCSIS 3.1 became deployable. We worked on PNM for DOCSIS 3.1 at the specification, at the time we're developing the specifications. Now, a couple of interesting things. We already know, we are already using DOCSIS 3.0 PNM functions to look at DOCSIS 3.1 signals. This is extremely interesting. We didn't know about that. In retrospect, we just didn't realize going into the field. You know, we've been testing OFDM signals in the field and the downstream for quite some time, and we actually use PNM functionality that exists with DOCSIS 3.0 modems to look at and to evaluate DOCSIS 3.1 signals. I showed that in a couple of presentations that I made, but in general, if you can look at, for example, the full spectrum capture out of a DOCSIS 3.0 modem and look at some of the PNM functions that data provides, you can actually see and to some degree analyze DOCSIS 3.1 signals. So that's a very interesting thing. Moving forward, we're already working on expanding PNM tools and functionality to support DOCSIS 3.1 signals so that we can take advantages of functionality that becomes available with PNM and DOCSIS 3.1. So also very, very happy with how well do these features and functionality helps us with our operations, both simplifying it and making it better.
Very good. And on that upbeat note, we've reached the half-hour mark, which is the ending of our presentation. I want to thank our experts, Chris Bastian, Senior Vice President and CTO of SCTE, as well as George Salinger, Vice President of Access Architecture at Comcast, for their time and their expertise. Want to thank, of course, Eris and VX for their sponsorships and making this hangout possible, and of course, you and our audience for attending. If you know someone who would benefit from viewing this presentation at some future date, it will be available on demand via the BTR website, as well as via YouTube, so you can search for it there as well. Again, thank you very much for attending. Have a happy new year, great holidays, and good luck to you all in 2016. We'll see you then.